Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I'd take out the last photo of Clara and me, the one from her college graduation. I was holding her degree like it belonged to me. And in a way, it did. I sewed every hem of that gown with my prayers. I kept a little notebook under my mattress. Each night, I wrote a few lines to Samuel. Just thoughts mostly. Things I would have said over coffee or after dinner. Things like, "Do you think she ever loved us?" Or, "I saw a bluebird today, just like the one that nestled on our porch in '72. And still, no calls. Not for Mother's Day, not for my birthday, not even when the doctors found the lump. They told me gently. I think they assumed I'd cry or ask about options, but I just nodded. Olivia cried for me. That's the kind of person she was. A few months before the end, something strange happened. I received a card, no return address. Inside was a photo, an old one, of Clara and the boys building a snowman in our front yard. I remembered that day. She had just gotten her promotion and drove up unexpectedly. The boys begged me to find old scarves and mittens. We drank cocoa, we laughed. That photo made me weep for the kind of forgetting that doesn't come from age, but from choice. I realized then, forgetting someone isn't the same as not remembering. It's deciding they don't deserve to be remembered. If you're still here, I wonder, have you ever wondered what your children will remember about you? I started preparing myself quietly. I didn't have much to leave behind. The money was gone. The house was someone else's now, and the company had a new name on the sign. But I still had a story, a name, a voice, and I wasn't going to let it disappear. I asked Olivia to help me record something, just audio, nothing fancy. She didn't ask why. She just held my hand and nodded. I told the story you're hearing now, word for word. Not out of bitterness, but because I needed someone, somewhere to know what love looks like when it's been emptied out and left to dry like old paint. I never thought I'd tell this story, but sometimes when silence becomes heavier than grief, you find yourself whispering into the wind, hoping someone, anyone, will hear you. You see, I didn't die in a hospital, surrounded by loved ones holding my hand. I didn't pass away peacefully in my sleep while my children wept at my bedside. No, I died in a folding chair on a cracked patio in Phoenix, Arizona, while the sun set quietly behind the fence. I died with $2.4 million in her name, and not even a phone call to ask how I was doing. Tell me, from where are you listening to my story? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments below. And if my voice finds a place in your heart today, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes in promises. The year was 1957 when I first laid eyes on the house that would carry the weight of my family's history. A small 2-bedroom cottage on the edge of Flagstaff. My husband, Samuel, had just gotten home from serving in Korea, and I was working at the local library, saving every penny in a coffee tin under the sink. We had nothing but love and empty cupboards, and for some reason, it was more than enough. Our daughter, Clara, came 2 years later. She was the kind of baby who rarely cried and always reached for your face with those tiny fingers like she needed to memorize it. I still remember rocking her by the window while the rain tapped gently on the glass, her breath warm against my neck. That house, with its creaky floorboards and chipped paint, felt like a palace when she laughed. The days began to melt together like forgotten pages in an old book. Breakfast, medication, the occasional shuffle to the courtyard. I stopped crocheting. I stopped writing letters. What was the point, really, in creating things that no one wanted anymore? One nurse, Olivia, used to sit with me during her break. She was young, maybe in her 20s, with eyes that looked like they still believed in people. She asked me once why I didn't have any pictures in my room. I told her I used to carry a whole house full of memories. Now all I had was a drawer full of receipts and reminders to breathe. The pain wasn't in losing the money, or the house, or the birthdays. It was in knowing that I gave someone the best parts of me, and they discarded them like the crust of a sandwich. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being forgotten by the people who once swore they'd never let go of your hand. One evening, Olivia wheeled me out to the patio just before sunset. The air was warm and dry, the sky painted in soft orange and lilac. She brought me a cup of mint tea. No one else was around. I asked her to leave me there for a while. She hesitated just for a second, then smiled and said she'd be nearby. I sat in that old metal chair, the kind that creaks under your weight like it's sighing along with you. I sipped the tea slowly, listened to the wind brush the leaves, closed my eyes, and I remembered everything. I remembered Samuel's laugh as he fixed the porch light with the screwdriver in his mouth. I remembered Clara's first word. It was Mama. I remembered my kitchen smelling like cinnamon rolls and lavender soap. I remembered dancing in the living room while the radio played Ella Fitzgerald and the world felt endless. I remembered the weight of a life full of love, even if it ended alone. That's the thing about memories. They don't keep you warm, but they remind you that once you were held, you were needed, you were someone's whole world. When Olivia found me, the tea was still warm and my eyes were closed, but I was gone. No obituary, no family at the funeral home. Olivia paid for the flowers herself. She said I liked white roses. The director called Clara, left a message. She never called back. They cremated me on a Tuesday. My name is Martha Louise Ellison. I was born in 1938 in a house with a leaky roof and a garden full of sunflowers. I loved once, deeply, and I was betrayed quietly. But if you're listening to this, then maybe, just maybe, the story didn't end in silence. Maybe someone out there will think of their mother today. Maybe someone will call their grandmother just to say, "I remember." And maybe that's enough. If this story touched your heart, like and subscribe. It helps keep the memories alive. And leave a comment below. Where in the world are you listening from? Because no story should vanish quietly. Not even one that ended in a broken chair under a Phoenix sunset. We didn't have much, but what we had, we built. Samuel started a small HVAC repair business that grew slowly over the decades. By the late 1980s, he had 3 trucks, 6 employees, and more customers than he could count. We never lived flashy. No designer clothes, no vacations to Paris. Just hard work, love, and Sunday roast dinners around the same wooden table we bought for $30 in 1961. Clara grew up into a bright, headstrong woman. She went off to university in Tucson and came back with a degree, a fiancé, and a hunger for something bigger. We were proud, so proud. But even then, I saw the shift. She didn't laugh the same way. She started talking about how we settled and how she'd never lived like that. We brushed it off as youthful ambition. Samuel used to say, "Let her chase the stars. We'll always be the moonlight when she needs to come home." But she never came back home. She built a new life, bigger, busier, bolder, married a man in finance, had 2 sons, bought a home in Scottsdale with a wine cellar and a pool shaped like a guitar. We visited, of course, birthdays, Christmas, but the visits grew shorter, the phone calls less frequent, the laughter forced. When Samuel passed in 2003, the silence in the house was unbearable. I sat on the edge of our bed, holding his glasses in my hands, not knowing where to put them now. Clara came for the funeral. She cried. She kissed my cheek. And then, just like that, she was gone again. I waited by the phone for weeks. Nothing. So, I did what mothers do. I reached out. I called. I wrote letters. I sent cookies for the boys, birthday cards, even when they never sent one back. And still, I held hope. One day, in 2008, she called, said she was worried about me living alone, said the house was too much for someone my age. She talked about how she and her husband could manage my affairs and keep everything organized. Said it was just paperwork. "For your peace of mind, Mama," she said, "it's what Dad would have wanted." I wanted to believe her. So, I signed the papers. I didn't know at the time, but I had just signed over everything. The house, the business Samuel built, the savings, all of it. It was all now in her name. I was still allowed to live there, but legally, I owned nothing. At first, nothing changed. She even came to visit a little more. She said the boys were busy, but she'd bring pictures. And then, in 2011, I tripped on the porch and fractured my hip. I called her from the hospital, voice shaking, tears rolling down my cheeks. She said, "I'll try to come next week, Mama, but it's such a busy season." Next week never came. A man in a navy suit showed up instead, said Clara had arranged for me to be relocated to a more manageable property in Phoenix, a senior living community. Very nice, he said. Lots of sunlight.
They sold the house, the one I spent 47 years in. The one where Clara took her first steps and where Samuel died in my arms. The community was clean, sure, but it wasn't home. It smelled like bleach and boiled peas. People came and went. Some smiled. Some didn't remember their names. I spent my days staring at the wall, wondering if I'd be remembered like this, as someone who got moved around like an old piece of furniture, too dusty to keep but too decent to throw away. I called Clara, left voicemails, wrote letters. I even crocheted blankets for the boys. No reply. Until one day, I saw her on TV, a local news segment about women in leadership. She had just sold the company Samuel built for $2.4 million and was speaking about empowering the next generation through legacy. Legacy. She used that word while standing on heels on a stage built from my husband's sweat and my life's love. If you're still listening, I wonder, have you ever loved someone so much it blurred your vision? There were days I thought about calling the police, getting a lawyer, but I didn't want headlines. I didn't want my grandsons to read about their grandmother fighting their mother in court. So I stayed quiet until the silence became too loud. They stopped paying for the assisted living, said I had too many extras on my account. I was moved to a cheaper place. Fewer nurses, fewer visitors. I started forgetting things, names, faces, dates. But I never forgot Clara's face when she told me she'd take care of me. I never forgot the taste of betrayal that grew bitter in my throat every time I opened the mailbox and found nothing. If you stayed with me this far, thank you. You've listened longer than my own daughter ever did. I suppose that's what aches the most. Not the betrayal itself, but the silence that followed. The way someone you held in your arms as an infant can grow to forget the sound of your voice. The very person you would have given your life for lets you slip away without even asking why. There were so many things I wish I could have told Clara before the end.
Like how I kept every handmade card she gave me from kindergarten through high school. They're all still tied together with a pink ribbon in a shoebox that now sits unopened in some storage unit. Or how I used to wait by the window every day at 3:20 p.m. because that's when her school bus dropped her off. Add warm milk on the stove and have cookies ready, just so she'd know someone was waiting for her. Or how, after her father passed, I would still set 2 places at the table out of habit because I didn't want her to feel like half of the family was gone. But I never got to say any of that. I didn't want my final words to her to come out of bitterness or guilt. I wanted them to come from love, even if she never returned it. Do you know that feeling? That unbearable itch to be seen again by someone who once saw you completely? Sometimes, in the still of the night, I would imagine a knock at the door. I'd picture her standing there, eyes glassy with regret, saying, "Mama, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I miss you." But dreams like that are dangerous. They keep you hanging on long after the rope has snapped. There was a man in the facility, Edgar, who used to sit across from me at dinner. He was quiet, wore the same brown sweater every day. We never spoke much. One day, though, he leaned in and whispered, "Do you think they even remember our names?" That haunted me because I wasn't sure anymore. Do you? Do you remember the full name of your grandmother, her birthday, her favorite song? We think we have time. We think love is permanent, but love, true, active love, takes effort. It takes phone calls. It takes showing up when it's not convenient. It takes choosing someone again and again, even when the world gives you 100 reasons not to. I stopped checking the mailbox after a while. Nothing ever came. Not even junk mail with my name on it. It's like I disappeared from the world's database. But somehow, Olivia never forgot me. She brought me little surprises, a vanilla-scented lotion, a lavender sachet under my pillow, a slice of peach pie from her grandma's recipe. She was the only one who touched my hand without needing a reason. Sometimes we don't need family by blood, just someone who chooses to care.
I told Olivia once, "You're the only person who still looks me in the eye." She smiled and said, "That's because I see you." If only Clara had said that once, just once. They called it failure to thrive on my chart. That's what they write when someone's body starts to give up, not because of disease, but because of something deeper. The quiet breaking of the soul, the slow unraveling of hope. People think dying is one sharp moment, but it isn't. It's a soft fading, a slow turning down the volume until all you hear is your own memory playing on loop. I kept thinking about what I'd say if Clara ever walked through that door, how I'd react. Would I scream? Would I cry? Would I fall into her arms like a lost child? But no one came. On my last birthday, I sat in the garden. The staff had put up a small sign that said, "Happy 85th, Martha," in crooked handwriting. Olivia brought me a cupcake with a candle in it. I didn't even make a wish. I just watched the flame flicker, then die out on its own. I didn't cry. I think I'd ran out of tears. But that night, something strange happened. One of the other nurses came in and said, "You have a visitor." I thought surely it must be a mistake, but no. In walked a young woman with long dark hair and eyes that looked almost familiar. She held a notebook in her hand and said, "Are you Mrs. Ellison?" I nodded, unsure whether I should speak. She said, "I'm Sarah, Clara's daughter, your granddaughter." My heart stopped. I hadn't seen her since she was 5. She was a woman now. Her voice soft, but unsure, she said, "I found some old letters in the attic. The ones you wrote to Mom. She never sent them. She told us you'd moved overseas. I felt dizzy. The world tilted slightly as I tried to process the lie. I whispered, "You told you I left?" She nodded. She said you didn't want to be part of our lives anymore. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse into myself, but instead, I just reached for her hand. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. She cried, I listened, and for the first time in years, I felt seen again. She told me how she'd hired a lawyer and found out about the business sale, how she tried contacting Clara but got stonewalled at every turn, how she found my name through a patient registry after weeks of searching. I told her everything, not to turn her against her mother, but so she'd know the truth, the real truth, not the clean, quiet version told at family dinners. At the end of the visit, she held my face and said, "I'm sorry for all of it, for not looking sooner."
I smiled the best I could and said, "You found me. That's enough." She promised to come back, to bring her brother, to write, to call, but she never did. Maybe she meant to. Maybe life got busy. Maybe she thought we had more time. But the next knock on the door wasn't hers. It was Olivia, with that quiet sadness in her eyes. She didn't say anything. She just knelt beside me and held my hand, and in that silence I knew this was the end. He didn't look me in the eyes much after that day, and when he did, it wasn't the same. There was a distance, like he was already gone. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that he was busy, that the world outside was pulling him in all directions. But deep down, I knew. I was being left behind in pieces, and no one was picking them up. The calls became fewer. The holidays became quieter. Birthdays were forgotten. The chair in the corner where I used to knit his tiny sweaters when he was little became my only company. The threads I wove for him years ago, they still held, but the bond, it was unraveling. One winter, I had a bad fall in the kitchen. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. No footsteps, no door opening, just me and the ticking clock on the wall. Eventually, a neighbor found me and called for help. When I reached the hospital, the nurse asked, "Is there someone we should call?" And in that moment, I realized I didn't know who. I gave them his number anyway. He didn't come. He sent money instead, a fat check with a typed note that read, "Hope this helps. Sorry, I'm tied up." Tied up. What a phrase. It was then that I learned something no mother ever wants to know. You can give someone your entire life, your every breath, and still be forgotten. Not hated, not even angry with, just erased, like an old song no one plays anymore. If you're still listening, I wonder, have you ever felt invisible to the people you loved the most? Sometimes I'd sit by the window in that small Phoenix house, watching the sun dip behind the desert hills. I'd pretend he'd call. I'd imagine his voice, that boyish excitement when he got a good grade or when he saw snow for the first time.
I kept all his childhood drawings, stored them in an old shoebox beneath my bed. That box held more love than any letter he ever sent as an adult.
The house was paid off. His name was on everything: the deed, the car, the savings account. It was all part of the legacy I thought I was leaving. But that legacy felt more like a bribe now. Like I was buying love with assets, with paperwork, with things that didn't laugh, didn't hug, didn't hold your hand when you were scared. I remember one night clearly. It was a Thursday. The clock read 2:17 a.m. I was in that old recliner, the one with the torn leather and the broken spring. I couldn't sleep. My heart felt heavy, not in a medical sense, in a soul sense. I stared at the dark corners of the room and whispered, "I miss you." I wasn't sure who I was talking to anymore. Him? My husband? Myself. I cried without sound, the kind of crying that aches in the bones and makes you feel like you're sinking into the earth. I thought of calling him just to hear his voice, but I stopped myself because I knew he'd answer out of obligation, not love. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And have you ever given everything only to be left with nothing? The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds like golden threads trying to stitch me back together. I brewed myself a weak cup of tea. No sugar, my doctor had warned me, but sweetness wasn't something I tasted much anyway. I shuffled to the mailbox, holding on to the wall for balance. There was a letter, handwritten. My heart skipped. Maybe, just maybe, it was him. But it wasn't. It was from a local church asking for donations. Funny, isn't it? Even strangers expected something from me. Everyone remembered my money, not me. Later that week, a social worker came by, a sweet girl in her 20s. She sat across from me and asked, "Do you have any immediate family to list as emergency contacts?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to protect him from the truth of who he'd become. But instead I whispered, "No, not anymore." She looked at me with those big, pitying eyes. I hated that look. I didn't want pity. I wanted to be remembered.
At night, I started speaking aloud to the walls, to the clock, to the empty photo frames I couldn't bear to refill. I told stories, old ones, about the time he got lost at the fair and how I ran barefoot through gravel just to find him. About his first heartbreak, when I stayed up with him till dawn, just listening. I told those stories because if I didn't, who would? And still, nothing. No call, no visit, just silence and dust, and the occasional sound of the neighbor's dog barking at shadows. Eventually, my legs gave out more often. My breath became shorter. I stopped going outside. I didn't want the neighbors to see me like that, a rich woman in a dying body, forgotten by the one person who was supposed to care. Then, one morning, it happened. I couldn't get up. The teacup shattered on the floor. I reached for the phone, but my fingers couldn't grip. I remember the smell of old carpet, the tick of the clock, and the silence, always the silence. The headlines later said, "Elderly woman found days after death, no immediate family present." But what they didn't say was, I gave him everything: the roof over his head, the food in his belly, the inheritance that would make him rich. And yet, when I needed him most, he gave me nothing, not even a goodbye. In those last moments, as my eyes blurred and my heartbeat slowed, I wasn't thinking about the mansion I left behind, the 7 figures tucked away in his account, or the lawyers who shook my hand and called it a job well done. I was thinking about a little boy with scraped knees and wide eyes who once looked at me like I was his whole world. I was thinking about all the birthdays I never missed, the sleepless nights I spent by his side when he had fevers, and the times I went without, so he never had to. I wasn't afraid to die. I was afraid of dying invisible. And in the end, that's exactly how I went. But maybe, just maybe, if someone hears this story, if it reaches just one heart, my life won't be entirely forgotten. Let it be known, love should never be measured by what we inherit, but by what we remember. Take care of the ones who raised you, because one day, when they're gone, you won't be able to buy back the time you ignored them. Money can fill a bank account, but only love fills a home.